buttons from their uniforms for goods. Besides the strange and wonderful wares of the bazaar, there was the exotic slave market, where for a month's wages you could buy a slave girl. Then there was the glorious Cairo of the Mamelukes, whose mysterious palaces were full of hidden rooms. Where cloistered ladies of the harem peered from behind screens, watching the men talking and eating. The Mamelukes lived in great luxury, with mosaic floors and staircases of marble, alabaster, polished granite. There was a bath on every floor and windows with glass panes. Bonaparte occupied the house of one of the Mamelukes who had fled Cairo. But it wasn't all palaces and luxury. Napoleon had to deal with the fact that Egyptians, rich or poor, were bound together by one thing: a consuming devotion to their religion, Islam. So Bonaparte, being a practical man, announced, "I am not Christian, and my army and I want to become Muslims." It's really pretty wild stuff. It's as if the President of the United States had arrived in Cairo and announced that he and his entire entourage was converting to Islam. It's incredible. But you know, you have to remember, Napoleon has just been through the French Revolution. He's really a radical. And he's saying things that no other general on the planet would say. There was a small problem with conversion, however. Muslims do not drink alcohol, and the males are all circumcised. Two prospects that held little appeal for the French soldier. As the army settled in Cairo, Bonaparte must have been pleased. He had just vanquished the Mamelukes and was master of Egypt. But then disaster struck. Napoleon had defeated the Mamelukes and taken possession of Egypt. But his luck was about to change. In this bay at Abu Qir, on Egypt's Mediterranean coastline, Napoleon came face to face with disaster. You see, he wasn't alone. The British fleet, commanded by England's greatest admiral, Horatio Nelson, had been searching for their French enemy. And at Abu Qir, they finally cornered their prey. The French admiral had wanted to sail his warships to a safer anchorage, but Napoleon insisted they stay in the Egyptian waters. It was a decision that was going to cost him. That's because Abu Qir Bay is an admiral's nightmare, an unprotected, shallow bay that today is only used by fishermen who wouldn't dream of mooring overnight, let alone anchor there for a month. The French admiral, Brier, anchored his fleet as close to the coast as he dared and aimed all his cannons seaward in case Nelson found them, which is exactly what happened. At 2 o'clock, on the afternoon of August 1st, Nelson spotted the entire French fleet at Abu Qir Bay. If he waited for his fleet to catch up to him, it would be 6 o'clock before he attacked. With only a couple of hours of daylight remaining, Nelson decided to fight the most spontaneous naval battle in history. The French expected the British to fight in the accepted way, to wait until daybreak and then sail their ships opposite the French and fire away until one surrendered. But Nelson threw the rulebook away and sailed straight into the attack. As the British ships neared the French line, they saw that they could slip between the shore and the anchored French ships. Never expecting to be attacked from the shore, the French had no guns facing in that direction, and the battle became a rout. As the battle raged through the night, the roar of cannons and screams of the wounded and dying filled the air. The L'Orient, the largest ship in the world with 120 cannons, was about to perish. She was on fire, and having been freshly painted, was highly flammable. When the fire reached her store of gunpowder, She exploded with a roar that could be heard 50 miles away. It was undoubtedly the loudest sound they had ever heard. Shocked, the men on both sides stopped fighting for 10 minutes. When the battle was over, Nelson declared, "Victory is not a name strong enough for such a scene." It was the most decisive battle in naval history, Napoleon's Pearl Harbor. Nelson was a Navy man and had no intention of fighting on land. He had destroyed Bonaparte's warships, and it would be difficult for the French to get supplies or reinforcements from France. He dryly commented, "Their army is in a scrape and will not get out of it." And he sailed away, leaving the French stranded in Egypt. Imagine Napoleon's situation. His fleet is destroyed. He's stranded. He can't get supplies or troops from France. It's a military disaster. What's he going to do? He founds a scientific institute here. This is no ordinary soldier. This is a general with incredible drive and intellectual ability. Napoleon's institute was made up of scientists, scholars, and artists whom he brought with him to study every aspect of Egypt. One of my favorites was Vivant Denon, the artist who helped Bonaparte bring Italian art back to France during the Italian campaign. At 55, Denon was one of the oldest members of the Egyptian campaign, but was quite happy to sketch the temples as bullets whizzed by his head. Then there was General Caffarelli, who led the engineering corps. He had lost a leg fighting in Germany and scurried about on a wooden one. Bonaparte really liked his spirit and took Caffarelli with him wherever he went. At the first session of the Institute, Bonaparte, the vice president, suggested research topics for the scientists, such as, how can the bread be improved? He is a Frenchman. Are the raw materials for gunpowder available in Egypt? He is a soldier. How can we improve the legal system of Egypt? He's a thinker, too. The scientists were free to investigate topics of their own, and even the most timid was more eager to explore the pyramids than to study bread ovens. With the Institute formed, Bonaparte was now ready for his tour of the pyramids. And like every other tourist, he was probably shown a mummy. When Bonaparte visited the pyramids, he must have been really impressed. Remember, the Great Pyramid was twice as tall as any building in France. Until the Eiffel Tower, it was the tallest building on Earth. Napoleon urged some of his soldiers to climb the Great Pyramid, but he remained at the base. He had a sharp mathematical mind and calculated that there were enough stones in the three large pyramids to build a wall 9 feet high and 3 feet thick around France. Then, accompanied by religious leaders of Cairo, he entered the Great Pyramid. They came in through an entrance made by tomb robbers centuries before them. Napoleon climbed up through this passage into the Grand Gallery. It would have been lit by torches. As he climbed higher and higher, he must have wondered what he was going to see. Then he entered the burial chamber of the pharaoh. When Bonaparte came in here with his entourage, it looked pretty much like today. Just a stone sarcophagus. The rest had been robbed thousands of years ago. Then he did the unexpected. He asked to be left alone in the king's chamber. We don't know for sure what happened in here when Bonaparte was by himself. But as he was leaving, one of his officers noticed he was a little pale and asked him if anything strange happened. Bonaparte told him never to mention it again. Towards the end of his life, Napoleon was about to tell someone what had happened. But then he changed his mind. He said, "No, never mind. You wouldn't believe it."
Maybe he saw Alexander the Great. Great men are supposed to have visions. And Bonaparte was never afraid to dream the big dream.